OK, let's stay with all things technology, because companies like Apple, which I mentioned a few moments ago, and indeed Facebook and Microsoft, they all started from small beginnings. Now, funding was the key to making them the global giants they are today. But the big question, just how easy is it to access the money? And where do you go if you're an African tech company with big ambitions to take on the world? Well, the chances are you'll turn to my guest, Nzube Ufodike of Move Venture Capital Advisory. A very good morning to you. I mean, look, it's not just bigging you up. I mean, that is the fact, because it is very difficult for people to know where to go. So you would be one of the first ports of calls, really, wouldn't you?
Indeed. We do help companies that are a little further down the line. But if one has an idea and is looking to take it through the initial concept to a commercial idea, then the first step is obviously approaching friends, families, and fools. They call it the 3 Fs. You need to get them to back you, put a little bit of capital into your idea and get you onto the next stage. And then you can open it up to angels and venture capitalists.
And that's where you come into it.
Absolutely. So we come in at the venture capital stage, typically when one's looking to raise between 1 and 10 million, and would be helping the technology, media, telecoms companies to put the right systems in place to communicate effectively with the prospective VCs that can be placing capital in exchange for equity in those companies.
But it's an interesting market that you belong to, because you've got a lot of black companies which are very active, very energetic. They're going to venture capital groups to run by white businessmen and women, and they're finding it very difficult to get in. Or perhaps they're told, well, yes, we are going to help you, but perhaps the tariff you pay at the entrance gate is going to be a little bit higher. Why is that?
So in terms of geographical focus, things are slightly different across each region. So in the US, for instance, where indeed it is primarily male and white dominated, you have some ethnic groups that have succeeded. So the Indian entrepreneurs have, caught their own, made a mark in Silicon Valley, and groups like the Indus Entrepreneur are doing amazing things for the Indian communities. When you look at Africa specifically, obviously most investors in Africa, in the angel and the VC space, are African, but there is not so much capital available within that space because it's not as developed a sector. So we don't have the same sort of systems and the same sort of expectations as entrepreneurs when going to talk to local VCs. For instance, a VC in Africa is likely to go for a convertible note. So this is not just a simple equity placement, but something that has a bit of a debt structure to it, which doesn't really apply in most other parts of the developed countries. So you get a standard equity note here, as opposed to the convertibles in Africa.
You've got the debt element attached to it. But I mean, it is still tough nonetheless, and presumably it must have been even more challenging after the 2008 global banking crisis, because we know certainly what was happening in the United Kingdom and indeed elsewhere. A lot of businesses were thirsty for investment, but there was a reluctance to lend, not just on the part of banks, but also from other sources as well.
Absolutely, but we have to remember that the early stages of businesses are very risky. So in any part of the world, starting up a business is a risky venture. Getting capital for that is hard at the best of times, but post the credit crunch and the crisis, especially during that period, it became even more challenging for many entrepreneurs across the world, not just in Africa.
But the key to it, regardless of what stage you're at in the growth of your business, is that plan, because it has to be rock solid, really, because you're going from getting, let's say, £50,000, £100,000 from family and friends to actually taking it to the level where you need £10 million. Now, that's a lot of money by anybody's standards. Perhaps in terms of handing out the money, it's relatively small for a VC, which is sitting on a big fund, but it's making sure you've still got a really tight business plan. Is that where some companies let themselves down?
The plan is a key aspect, but being flexible enough and realizing that that plan would change, not could, but would change during the evolution of the business is important. I think most VCs do focus on the team. So the key management team within any startup company is what's very critical to sort of giving confidence that they will go the extra mile. They would stick to, commit to, focus on that business and drive it through to success. The business plan, essential, giving financials and projections that give the investor some confidence so they can say to their investment committee that, look, we've ticked the boxes with this particular project. However, it's important that the team dynamics are also just as credible, if not more.
Yeah, and that is the key to it. It is the team dynamics. So in terms of where you're placing the investment at the moment, I mean, just give us a broad brush sweep of where it is from your company's perspective. What are the ones to look out for? It is strictly technology related?
So we look at technology, media, telecom, so it's a slightly broad remit, and we are an advisory firm. We get capital through the actual VCs and PE funds in our network that want to place capital into companies, and it cuts across. So in Africa, you've seen a lot of money going into the tech companies that are consumer-facing. So online retail, for instance, is one huge growth area.
And highly competitive as well.
Indeed, highly competitive. There are quite a few companies there that have not just cloned operational models of the Amazons or eBays of this world, but they've also adapted it and localized it to their regions, and they're making a success out of this. Okay,
so there's plenty to talk about. Unfortunately, time runs against us, but rejoin us later, certainly in the next few months or so, because there's lots to tell. We'll leave it there. But Nzube Ufodike, thank you so much for coming in, and we'll hook up with you at some point in the future. Now, moving on, because the President of the European Parliament...